Hello, this is Nico, and in this Science with Nico, we're going to talk about the ionization of acids, and we're going to look at the behavior of acids in solution in a bit more detail than our introductory video. Okay, so acids, when they are brought into contact with water, they ionize. And so what that means is if we take, for example, some hydrochloric acid, and we toss it in water, it's going to ionize and give up its hydrogen ions. Now, one of the things that chemistry students have to note as they move into senior chemistry in high school and onwards is that this is a simplification of what's really happening. You see, there is no such thing as a hydrogen ion in solution. It's not a stable enough ion. That would literally just be a proton by itself, and it's going to run into stacks of particles in solution, and it's just not quite stable enough. It's very reactive as a hydrogen ion by itself, or a proton by itself. That sees the other common name for a hydrogen ion when talking about acids and bases. And what actually happens is exactly that. That hydrogen ion runs into a water ion to form what's called a hydronium ion. And so when a chemist talks about acids and bases, they're going to most commonly use H+ just as a bit of shorthand, but what they really mean is hydronium ions. Okay, so just be mindful that the reality of the situation described above just here is that our hydrochloric acid, okay, which if we just start from the material hydrogen chloride, it's actually a covalent molecule in gas. All right, and when we form the acid, the aqueous acid, we have to bubble that gas through water, where it will ionize by reacting with water to form a H3O plus ion, a hydronium ion, and leave behind our chloride spectator. Okay, so in reality, when we talk about an acid and the behavior of an acid, it's all dependent on the presence and amount of hydronium ions, but we may actually use H+ as a shorthand. Just one of those things to be mindful of. To help you understand this concept, what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at a challenge where we actually write the ionization equations of the following acids with water, specifically hydrogen bromide, which is a close cousin of hydrochloric acid, behaves very, very similar. The only real difference is that it has a different boiling point. And we're also going to take a look at nitric acid as well, in terms of how they both react with water in their ionization reactions. All right, so this is a challenge. Remember, hit pause, give it a go at home, and then I'll go through the answer. Don't forget to hit pause. All right, let's take a look at what's happening in this situation just here. So we're writing balanced equations for the ionization of the following acids with water. And so that means that each of these acids is reacting with water. Okay. Now I'm going to focus just on the top one just here, then we'll do the nitric acid one. All right, so our hydrogen bromide is reacting with water to form a hydronium ion plus a bromide ion. And so what's happening just here, of course, is our hydrogen ion, our proton, has been donated to our water molecule. Okay, likewise with our nitric acid, they're reacting together to form a hydronium ion plus and leave behind a nitrate anion. And so again, what's happening is our acid is donating its hydrogen ion to a water molecule to form a hydronium ion. Okay. So this is one of those things we need to practice that and just be aware that there's the two ways of representing acids and you will see both. All right, so let's take a look at the strength of acids. That's our second concept we're going to explore in this video. Now, the strength of an acid, when we talk about an acid being strong or weak, that actually depends on how much of the substance reacts with water. Specifically, the term we use is ionize. So how much of the acid reacts to form ions, specifically hydronium ions, in water. Now, the little kicker to that is to note that strong acids, what we call strong acids, they ionize 100% in water. So just to paint a picture for us. All right. Okay. When we have a strong acid, okay, reacting with water, what's happening is 100% of the particles are ionizing to separate ions. Okay. But when we have a weak acid where we have partial ionization, these particles are only some of them are reacting to form hydronium ions and other spectators. Okay, so just be mindful that you need to be aware of strong and weak acids, and take note when doing acid and base problems if you're dealing with a strong or a weak acid. Now, let's take a look at a couple of examples just to help us look at this situation in a little bit more detail. All right, so I've chosen 3 examples for us to examine: hydrochloric acid, hydrofluoric acid, and ethanoic acid, which is also known as acetic acid. Now, each of these, hydrochloric acid is a strong acid, hydrofluoric and ethanoic acid, they are both weak acids. Now, what that means is our hydrochloric acid is going to ionize 100%, where our HF and our ethanoic acid will only partially ionize. As you can see here, 8% and 1.3% respectively. Now, you may have noticed there's a little bit of a strange thing going on here. These two are remarkably similar. Now, specifically, if we look at the formula of each of those in their molecular form, so we have our hydrochloric acid, okay, where we have our hydrogen atom with a covalent bond to our chlorine. That's what's it's going to exist as in the gaseous form. And we also have our hydrofluoric acid. Very, very similar. We have a hydrogen covalently bonded to a fluorine atom. You can think of this as being a little bit like a dumbbell, okay, where we have 2 atoms joined by a pair of electrons in a covalent bond between the 2. All right. Now, the difference between these 2 molecules is really very, very, very small, because they're very much the same shape, roughly the same size. All right. But the difference, of course, is these 2 halogen atoms. And what makes HF a weak acid, whereas HCl is a strong acid, comes down to the electronegativity of these 2 atoms, with fluorine being the most electronegative atom on the periodic table. It does not like to give away its electrons. So in this covalent bond, where there are there's a pair of electrons in each of these bonds, hydrofluoric acid, that fluorine does not want to give away those electrons, and so it holds tightly onto them, so only a very small quantity can ionize in solution. Hydrochloric acid, however, is quite happy to give away those electrons. All right, and as a result, it will react readily with water. It will readily ionize, and we consider that to be a strong acid. Now, what that means in terms of solution concentration of hydronium ions is quite interesting. Specifically, if we have a 0.1 mole per liter solution, we know that for a strong acid, for HF, our concentration of hydronium ions is going to be the same as our concentration of the acid itself, because it's got the 1 proton it can donate, so it's a 1-to-1 situation. However, In the case of hydrofluoric and ethanoic acid, each of these only partially ionized to 8% and 1.3% respectively. And so the hydronium ion concentration in solution is going to be dramatically lower for each of those and consistent with the percentage ionization that we find when we look at those looking at their pH in solution versus the prepared concentration of ions. Now, the strength of an acid depends on the degree of ionization. There's also a point to make that not every acid is going to have only one hydrogen ion that it can donate. All right, with this concept called polyprotism. All right, that is acids that can have more than one hydrogen ion that they can actually donate. Now, so far we've seen a variety of acids that we will see commonly used by us when we do practicals in the lab and are commonly going to be referred to in the notes. They include monoprotic acids that have only the one hydrogen ion that they can donate, and polyprotic acids such as diprotic acids like sulfuric acid, which can donate 2 hydrogen ions, and triprotic acids like phosphoric acid that can donate 3 hydrogen ions. Now, when we look at these polyprotic acids, there's some things we need to take note of, and that is that polyprotic acids ionize in stages. So if we take a look at sulfuric acid, what happens is that acid will actually ionize in stages. And that'll mean we have a first ionization where it donates that first proton to water and forms a hydronium ions, leaving behind the negative species shown just here. We also have a second ionization where it donates a second hydrogen ion to water, leaving behind the sulfate anion. Now, on top of this, a thing to note is that when you have a second or a third ionization of a polyprotic acid, that typically only forms a partial ionization. Okay? And so the reason for that is actually pretty straightforward. It creates an equilibrium situation where you only have part of your chemical species reacting with water. But the whole reason for why that happens is really straightforward. And if we take a look at here, when we give that first proton, we form this negatively charged species. Okay, to give that second hydrogen ion, that second proton to our water molecule, we need to pull a positively charged ion away from an already negatively charged ion. And so the two of those are going to want to stay together. And so it's harder to do, takes more energy to do. And so that's why we typically, for our second and third ionizations, only have partial ionizations of our acids. Now, another thing to note is that polyprotism does not correspond to the strength of an acid. Notably, sulfuric acid is a strong acid. It has 2 protons it can donate. All right, and the reason why it's a strong acid is that first ionization of the first proton is 100%. The second one's about 30% or so. All right. And if we compare that to, say, citric acid, which is a very weak acid, which has 3 protons that it can donate, all right, you would be understandable if you looked at this and went, oh, it's got 3 protons, it's a strong acid. But that's not the case. It all depends on the electronegativity of the atoms within the compound, okay, within the substance. Okay, time for a challenge. Now, your challenge is to write equations for each ionization of of phosphoric acid, of which there are 3 protons that can be donated. All right, so just remember the idea of this is to have a go at home for writing each of these ionization equations, each of these reactions with water. All right, and so hit pause, give it a go at home. When you're done, hit play and I'll go through the answer. Don't forget to hit pause. Alrighty. Now, let's start off going through this answer just here. Now, for our first ionization, we're going to have our phosphoric acid reacting with our water. And what's going to be happening is that's going to be donating a proton to our water. Okay, and that will form the following 2 species just here, including a hydronium ion. Now, for our second and third ionization, what's going to happen is our chemical species here is going to go on to react further by donating further protons to water. Okay, and again, forming a second hydronium ion in the case of the third ionization, donating that final proton or hydrogen ion to the water molecule and leaving behind our phosphate anion to form that third hydronium ion. So just take note that this is an important situation, being able to recognize that you have successive ionizations for polyprotic acids. So we have our first, second, and third ionization. Another thing to note is that we would expect it's going to get harder to remove those hydrogen ions and to donate those hydrogen ions as each stage goes on, and we would expect our second and third ionization to only be partial ionizations. Okay, let's finish up just here. So just take note in review. In this video, what we've talked about is the ionization of acids with water. We've talked about the strength of acids in brief, and we've also talked about polyprotism. All right, feel free to review this video. There is quite a bit to these concepts. All right, and if you have any questions, feel free to leave questions in the comments below or to ask me in class. Bye.